guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here. Today I'm going to be filming my April wrap up, and I read 7 books in the month of April, which I think was okay. I had a kind of reading slump-ish towards the end of April. There was a book I was reading which I didn't actually complete until May, so it's not going to be in this video, but it kind of made me, I wasn't really excited to read it, so I think that it sort of slowed me down a bit, but I did read 7 books, which I don't think is terrible, and I am still currently ahead of my Goodreads reading goal, so hopefully I can keep on with that. But yeah, I did enjoy this month of reading, and I do actually have the first week of May off, so hopefully I can catch up with some reading and get on with it there. But yeah, so let's get started with the first book I read. So the first book I read this month was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas, and I mentioned this book in my white bookshelf tour that I will link below for you to check out if you wanted to. But basically I read my first ever full Sarah J Maas book this month, and this was A Court of Thorns and Roses. I've read the novellas to the Throne of Glass series. I read The Assassin's Blade before, but I've never read a full book of hers, and so I actually managed to finally read one, and I was not disappointed. I really enjoyed this. This follows a girl named Feyre who lives in a world where there is basically a wall separating normal human world and also the fairy world. So she's hunting in the woods one day because her family has very little food, and she ends up killing a wolf, which turns out to be a fairy in disguise, and so she then gets basically taken by the fairies to the fairy side of the wall and is made to live there. It's kind of like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I really like the fact that although it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, it's not like too much. Like, I think if you know it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, then you kind of get that, but I don't think I would necessarily have come up with that on my own. I think I would have just thought it was a really good story. I really enjoyed the character of Lucien. He was like, so you have Feyre, and then you have the fairy who is Tamlin, and then you have Tamlin's like right-hand man is Lucien, and I really liked Lucien. I thought he was really an interesting character, and it was definitely good to see him like being really protective and stuff. It was really nice. Again, definitely really enjoyed the story. I can't wait to read the next one. I've heard only good things. In fact, people I've always heard that A Court of Mist and Fury, which is the second one in the trilogy, is the best one of all of them. So I really want to read that one and see how I feel about it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. It is quite graphic in places if you don't really enjoy like gruesome stuff, but I really enjoyed it anyway, and definitely gave it a 5-star. The next book I read this month, I'm not going to go into too much because I didn't actually like it at all. I gave it a 1-star. It was Will Grayson by John Green. I've talked about my feelings for John Green books before. Basically, I either love or hate them. I really liked The Fault in Our Stars. I liked Looking for Alaska a lot. I gave them both 5 stars, but I gave Paper Towns I think a 2 or a 3-star, and An Abundance of Catherines I gave 1 star. So it's kind of very much hit or miss. So I decided to read Will Grayson because I'm trying to read all of his books, and I gave it 1 star. I really did not like it. The way it was written was just really annoying, really kind of childish, and sort of, I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it. I am also a bit nervous about the fact that, I should have said it was by John Green and David Levithan as well, and I've never read a David Levithan book before, and now I'm not really wanting to. So if there's any recommendations you have for David Levithan books that I should give a go, then definitely let me know. But at the moment, I'm not inclined to pick one up. It hasn't really sold it to me. So yeah, I didn't like that. Although I do have currently out of the library Turtles All the Way Down by John Green, and I'm hoping that if I've liked 2 and I've not liked 3, then this should hopefully go in the good like I've liked pile. So that would be great if it does, but I'm kind of not holding out too much hope. The next book I read was actually a bit of a throwback to my childhood, and I read this when I was about 14 I think, and this is Forever by Judy Blume. And Judy Blume was one of those authors that I loved as a child. Like, Are You There, God It's Me, Margaret was amazing, and I reread that last year and I think I gave it a 3-star. And Forever is kind of like her first sort of, probably like, what do they call it, like, I don't know, I wouldn't say it was like middle grade so much, it was a little bit, slightly older I think. It basically follows a girl named Catherine who is kind of in that stage of like first love, and her and her boyfriend Michael are kind of discussing whether to have sex or not, and whether they think that it's a good idea and whether they want to do that. She's a virgin, so it's kind of the first time she's ever done it, and I think he's had previous partners before, I can't quite remember, but I think this all did seem, like reading it now, I'm kind of like, oh, it's a little bit like, I don't know, young for me. But then I also think that when I read it as a child, it was amazing. So I do think maybe it's just not one of those books that kind of like ages with you. It is very much based on like first love and first sex and like that sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know, I liked this book, I did, but I gave it a 2-star on reread just because I think for me it's just not really my taste anymore. But I still think it's a good book to read, especially if you're kind of in that like 16 age group, like 15, 16. So yeah, definitely would recommend that. If you're that age group, you should read it, but I don't think that I would recommend it to older readers. Next up, I read my favourite book of the month, which I talked about in my April favourites, so I will link that video below if you want to check it out. But it is Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins, and this is the second book to the Hunger Games, and I loved the Hunger Games, and I love this one. I gave this a 5-star also. I think this is one of those books that it's just cozy and like homely, and although people die in it and stuff, I think that I just really enjoyed the story. I've seen the films before, so I knew what was going to happen, but I just really enjoyed it. If you don't know what this is, the first book, The Hunger Games, follows Katniss Everdeen, who is living in a world where there are 12 districts, all governed by the capital, and each year one male, one female tribute is taken from each district. They are between the ages of 12 and 18, and they're kind of like picked out of a hat, their names, and they have to then participate in a fight to the death between all 24 people. And in the first one, Katniss volunteers because her younger sister is chosen from the hat, and she kind of volunteers in her place. And then this follows kind of like after everything happens and kind of what goes on in that. I again love this book. I think that the only thing I don't love is I don't like the relationship in this. Like, I won't tell you who Katniss ends up with, but she's in like a love triangle, and the person that she ends up in with this I do not like. I think that she should be with the other one, but that's kind of like I don't think it takes away from the story. I think it's just one of those things where I'm like, damn it, I would love it so much more if it was from the other side. But yeah, either way, I did really love this book. I can't wait to read the final one. I've got that on my shelf over there, Mockingjay, so I will read that soon hopefully, but until then I'm really loving this series so far. Next up is a book that is quite difficult to explain, but it's Going Too Far by Jennifer Eccles, and I came across this book in my library and thought I'd give it a go and see what it was like. I really like trying new YA authors that I haven't read from before, and I did like this. I gave this a 3-star. This basically follows a girl who is kind of always in trouble. She smokes, she does lots of things, I think she's trying to like get attention and things. Anyway, basically what happens is she is arrested with some friends on trespassing on a railway bridge, and she is made to go on a week of ride-alongs with a police officer, one of the police officers that found her on the bridge, and she has to do this like night shifts with him for a week. Instead of being like cautioned or whatever, they decide to do it this way, try and teach her a lesson a little bit. And she starts to fall for the police officer, who's not that much older than her, and it's kind of about that, and they learn about each other and they start to fall for each other, and then they realise, should they really be doing it? And I found this really odd. Like, I will say, like, I just found the whole position of power thing a little bit of a strange one, but I did think it was a really like sweet story as well. It was good. I think the romance was nice. I just think it was weird because it was between the two people that it was between. I think if it had been between people who were like more similar age groups maybe, or like more similar backgrounds, I don't know how I feel about it. It's just something about it that didn't sit completely well with me, but that's why I gave it a 3 stars. I did enjoy it, and I don't know, although I will say the one thing, this kind of was sold to me as like a bit of a sexy time book, and there was no sexy time in it, so I mean, I'm not disappointed by that, but I did think it was weird that it was kind of like the way it was described was sort of, I would be expecting that if I read, like when I went into it, so that's just something to be aware of, but I did really enjoy it. Then the next book I read was also another 5-star, and this was Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. Now, I have enjoyed Jodi Picoult's books before. I sometimes find that she's a bit biased, like she writes a book on one side. Like, I read one of her books that was on the death penalty, and she was very much against the death penalty, so it was very much swayed. But this book follows a black nurse who has been working at this hospital for like 20 plus years, and she is she's a midwife, so she works in labour and delivery, and she comes into work one morning. Nothing is kind of different, she's doing her job as normal, and she gets given the case of a young boy who'd just been born in the night, and so she had to go in and do all the normal things like weighing him and things like that. And the father is actually a white supremacist, and he basically essentially tells her supervisor that he doesn't want her anywhere near his child, and the supervisor allows that. And then sadly the little boy dies after a routine procedure, and which Ruth is her name, was actually the last person around the baby, and so it all spirals from there. She's the one that's going to get in trouble for this, and it's that storyline. And this reminded me of The Hate U Give, but like if Star was older and she was in Ruth's position. Like, I know that sounds really strange, but I think if you read it you'll understand what I mean. I loved this book, but it also was one of those books that just made me very uncomfortable because of the storyline. And I recognise that I have a white privilege. Like, I am not I cannot put myself completely in the position of anybody in that situation, if that makes sense, but I can definitely understand why we need to be sorting this out and changing people's attitudes, because it was just really kind of sad, and I genuinely did read it with my heart in my throat. I felt sick. I was very anxious reading it, and I was telling my boyfriend, like, I was like, this is making me very anxious, and he was like, well, don't read it then. And I was like, but I can't not read it. Like, this is it. It's not that kind of, like, I have to finish this. I really want to know what happens. And I do think the one thing about this book, and I do find this a lot in books that are set about a black main character who is being discriminated against. Often there is a white character who they are kind of meant to rely upon, and in this case the lawyer that is defending her is a white woman. Now, I have no problems with that, because I think that the relationship between white people and black people is a very important relationship, and it needs to be kind of talked about in books. But I do sometimes think that, like, I don't know, I just felt like maybe that didn't need to be the case. I don't know, it was just a strange sort of dynamic, I felt like. But I did really, really enjoy this book, and I think that it's definitely important. And again, if you like The Hate U Give, and you want to read like I think this is like an adult version, not an adult version, but it's an adult book as opposed to a YA book. So I think that if you liked that one, you would definitely like Small Great Things, and I definitely would recommend that you read it. And then the last book that I read this month was Body of Evidence by Patricia Cornwell, which is the second book in the Kay Scarpetta series. This follows a medical examiner, Kay Scarpetta, who is investigating a murder, and in this one she's investigating the murder of a woman named Beryl, who was found in her house having been murdered, but she seemingly let her killer in, even though she had a stalker and she was doing everything she could to stay out of her stalker's way. She'd like moved, and she had an alarm system and everything, but for some reason she'd let this person in, and it was a case of them trying to figure out who did it, where it happened, why it happened, and things like that. I gave this one a 3-star. I did like this book. I didn't love it. This wasn't my favourite out of the Kay Scarpetta series, and I have read quite a lot of these books now. But like I said, I am rereading them, so this is, like I said, was number 2, because I'm starting to reread them from the beginning. But I do still love the story, and I love the relationship between Marino, who is the police officer, and Scarpetta, who, like I say, is the medical examiner. I just think it's a really unique relationship, and I really, really enjoy it. So again, this is a series I would recommend. I don't think this is the best one of the series though. So that is the 7 books that I read this month. I hope that you liked this video. Let me know what books you read in April, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye guys!